Welcome to the CBIA BizCast. I'm your host, Ali Warshavsky, and today on our podcast, we have ConnectiCare President Eric Galvin joining us. A lot of our members have had questions about insurance lately, and you're here to answer them all. Thank you for joining us today.
A pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite, and looking forward to hopefully answering many of those questions from CBIA members.
Yeah, one of them is health insurance, as you know, is expensive. And we hear that from our members all the time, especially from the small business owners. Can you tell us some of the challenges small business owners face when they're purchasing health insurance for their employees?
Well, so, as you think about, especially in our state, just how many small businesses there are, it's actually a staggering amount of the workforce in Connecticut. And, as we think about the challenge of health insurance, just in general, we wholly agree, by the way, it is expensive and frankly, too expensive. And I think where that really starts to hit home is in the small group space, because, these are businesses, I don't have to tell your members, these are businesses that really are trying to navigate a pandemic. They're trying to navigate, pressures in inflation on all types of goods and services, and the last thing that they need is health insurance that continues to escalate in costs. Some of the considerations I would just say is really trying to strike the right balance of what product they're looking at, and this is where I think both the staff at CBIA as well as brokers have a really important role, so that we can help guide these small business owners to the right product that matches their needs. If you have, for instance, a younger workforce that might be healthier, you might want to be thinking about plans that are a little bit leaner in benefits, so that you get a lower monthly premium. But if you have a workforce that might have some folks that have chronic conditions, might be higher utilizers of care, you might want to go with a little bit of a richer plan. The way that I last comment, and I'll pause, but the way that I try to talk to people who don't do this every day, right? They're off running their business, whatever it happens to be, is really to think about it as the expected cost of health care is a number that we project. How you pay for it really comes in the form of what plan you pick. And you can pay more upfront and less as you use, or less upfront and more as you use. It's very similar to the way that you would think about any type of loan, and thinking about it in terms of, capital upfront. So that's what I would underscore as the biggest consideration, is really thinking about that plan design that you're looking for, and matching it to the population of your business.
Yeah, some good things to take and consider, especially if you're just getting a small business off the ground. There are many external factors that create challenges from a cost standpoint for small employers. Do you mind expanding on what those could be, the challenges they might face?
Yeah, so the way to think about this, in my view, would be health insurance is expensive because healthcare is expensive. I would, tell all of your members that, these aren't very high margin businesses like they maybe once were, in the 80s and potentially 90s. There are very, very thin margins in the health insurance business. And all of those dollars are really are going after the medical cost that patients consume. So the things that you want to consider in terms of these external factors is, where are people getting care? Where are they accessing that care? If someone is taking an expensive drug, are they getting the best possible price on that drug, and not just going where your doctor says, here, go to this pharmacy, get this drug. Mm-hmm. It's really being a consumer and asking those questions, and making sure that they're getting the best possible economic result, in addition to making sure that they're getting the best possible care and quality of outcome.
So when a customer or anyone walks into a pharmacy and you see the sign that says you can get this cheaper prescription here because of a price match, or you see some type of a coupon that might promise a lower price, you should really pay attention to those, because otherwise it will drive the cost of your insurance up in the future.
Yeah, I think if you think about it from a consumer standpoint, absolutely look at every potential option to get a better deal. Ask the questions. As I mentioned, I think if you'd like to call us, we're happy to help navigate people through those kinds of questions or the different programs that might be out there. But it's really important to be an educated consumer, and we're here to support folks to do exactly that.
And so that's one thing that drives the cost up, but I'm sure there's many other things, especially some things that might be going on at the Capitol that are cost drivers. Can you explain those a little bit? Some things that you're maybe fighting against when you're trying to bring the cost of healthcare down?
Yeah, so when we think about what's happening in our state as a first stop along that conversation, there is a lot of activity at a state level. Some of it is very helpful. The governor put forward an executive order mandating a cost increase benchmark, which we actually fully support. We think this is a really smart thing to do. Massachusetts has one in place, and it's been very effective. But we also have other items that just very candidly aren't as helpful, right? We hear a lot about single payer or public option, and frankly, those solutions don't do anything about the cost of care. All it does is talk about where or who you access that insurance coverage through. And that's one of the things that can be frustrating, is that there's not enough discussion about how do we lower the cost of care? How do we improve the outcomes? So we partner with the governor's office, the Office of Health Strategy. We try to be available and drive those kinds of conversations through the legislature where we can. We actually had a visit from one of our key legislators that sits on the insurance committee, and had that conversation, really talked about, what are some of the things that we can do to address the cost of care.
Yeah, can you explain a little bit more about cost growth benchmark, especially for listeners who these words might seem a little bit foreign to them?
Yeah, sure. So the cost growth benchmark is essentially a way where it doesn't just look at the insurance rates. It also looks at how costs of care increase year over year. And it brings everybody in that ecosystem together to answer to, well, why are hospital costs going up at 6 to 7% every year, sometimes more? And so I think, historically, we've tried to regulate simply through the insurance channel, and that's frankly, it's not enough. We need to regulate more broadly, but also be transparent with the public about what's really behind those costs. So that's one of the reasons why we're so behind the idea, supportive of the idea, that that you have a coming together, whether it be a physician's office, whether it be a drug company, a hospital system, and all be accountable to say, this is why we are increasing the cost of care, therefore your insurance premiums go up.
Mm-hmm. Does this mean that insurance premiums won't increase beyond 2.9%?
Yeah, unfortunately, it does not mean that they won't increase beyond 2.9%. So the benchmark of 2.9 is created by the Office of Health Strategy, and it uses retrospective data. It looks at historical data to set that benchmark. When we set premiums for a future period. We look forward to that period. And one of the things that you have to do is you have to have your best assumptions, your best guesses about what's the state of affairs going to be. For instance, the Department of Labor is expected to issue a requirement for any employers over 100 employees to have a vaccine mandate. So we have to make some type of a call on that and have to factor that into our expected costs. So that would be number one. Number two would be if you have employers that say if you're not vaccinated, well, then you have to have weekly testing. Those are costs that we're prepared to take on. Those are health policy and that's surveillance testing. It's not a medically necessary item. So there are a lot of elements like that go into what are the state of affairs. So the 2.9% benchmark, that's really a goal for the industry as a ecosystem. And it is unlikely that we'll be able to achieve that 2.9% given how quickly the cost of drugs increase and how quickly the costs in hospitals in other settings like labs, et cetera, increase.
The pandemic really did play an impact then on the cost of health insurance, correct?
It did. And so interestingly, I think initially we saw a lot of care get put on hold. Mm-hmm. Any kind of surgeries that weren't required, any doctor's visits that weren't absolutely necessary. And then what ended up happening, and so the public heard a lot about that, right? But I think what the public and I think a lot of CBIA members inclusive in that group, what they didn't hear about is the severity of cost that went with COVID patients. And then when all of those services came back mid last year, and they did come back, those were all on top of COVID related costs. And then as we looked at, for instance, small business, where our rates for 2021, we weren't allowed to have any COVID impacts embedded in those rates. So what we're seeing this year is, especially with new variants like the Delta variant, et cetera, the COVID costs are really, really pretty severe this year. Mm-hmm. And those are influencing how we think about, the uncertainty of the future and what, as a result, what premiums need to look like.
Oh, it's very interesting. The effect of not only obviously COVID and testing and vaccines, but also the delayed care that how that impacts it. So thanks for explaining that. Last question for you. Does ConnectiCare have any plans specifically designed for small business?
We do. And we actually have a variety of options for small businesses. And again, that's one of the reasons why we say, engage CBIA, engage a broker. We're happy to help, but we want to make sure that people don't feel like we're just selling somebody something that is what we prefer. We want to make sure that they have something that is in their best interest. So we have fully insured plans that, are fully compliant with the Affordable Care Act. They're a very traditional insurance policy, but we also offer fixed funding solutions, or FFS plans, as CBIA calls them. And those are sold exclusively through CBIA in our partnership with the organization. And they do save small businesses up to 25% by having a bit more flexibility on plan designs, as well as, we couple that with the predictability. We make it look like a month-to-month stable premium. And the small businesses also get to share in any kind of surplus at the end of that policy period. So it's a very attractive, it's a very attractive solution for a small business. If nothing else, they should look into it. We highly encourage folks to just educate yourself about all of the options out there.
Well, Eric, thank you so much. But I want to just give you a chance if there is anything else you want to add, any misconceptions you think people have about insurance and or ConnectiCare in general. Because I'm out of questions, but I want to give you the floor if you want to add anything.
I would just close by saying a couple quick things. First of all, we're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year, and I think people in Connecticut know what we stand for. We're neighbors that help neighbors. We take it personally because it is personal to us. I really encourage any of the small business owners out there to really, or HR leaders, really explore what's available to you. Again, we're here to help you, but there are a lot of resources that you should tap into and make sure you know what your options are. To those who are ConnectiCare customers, I would just, who might be listening, I would just say thank you for your business, for your partnership. We sincerely appreciate it, and we hope we earn that right every day. And finally, Ali, thanks for having me on the show today. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Well, thank you, Eric, for joining us. And for anyone listening who is interested in ConnectiCare, obviously you can visit their website. You can also visit ours. We do have insurance resources for business owners at CBIA.com. And thank you for listening to the BizCast. You can listen on Apple and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. You can also visit CBIA.com for more episodes.